What does the richest person you know do for a living? Story 1. Her grandfather created The Price is Right. She's been living off of the residuals her family gets, which is apparently tens of millions set aside just for her alone. I used to think those trust fund kids that just spend their fortune and never work for income would have to run out of money one day. Well, we were all hanging out and someone asked how wealth like that even works. She seemed happy to explain how, even if the royalties stopped overnight, the wealth grows in her accounts from interest and dividends, and that is more than she spends in a year, plus it's taxed less than our income is. Story 2. Land developer. Billions. He once showed me a picture of him and Bill Clinton riding an elephant in India, which also came with an interesting tale of the plane trip over there. Can't say I know him, but I've met our Governor Pritzker here in Illinois quite a bit. He's worth about $13 billion last I checked. Story 3. He owns Nvidia stock and invested heavily into Bitcoin in 2009. He was a millionaire, but Nvidia stock turned him into a multi-billionaire. Before he was just a crazy rich Asian, but now he's an ultra-crazy rich Asian. We're not the same financially, I'm just a normie, but he always asks me for advice on some rich person shit, like what's the difference between owning a literal compound in California versus 600,000 acres in Texas, and I have no idea. He invites me to his uber-wealthy Asian family dinners and shit. I don't know if any of you know what it's like eating $50,000 mango and melon of gold-plated toothpicks in a Grateful Dead hoodie surrounded by people in designer suites, but it's really awkward. Story 4. There's a guy I work with who started with one Jimmy John's franchise and grew it to 10. After 10 years, he sold them and invested the profits in the stock market and real estate. He managed all this while continuing his job as an airline pilot, which he still does. He even owns and flies his own private jet. Story 5. He was a school guidance teacher to inner city kids on Long Island. Drove a beat-up Honda Civic. Lived his life very frugal. He invested in stocks and then expanded to owning a few rentals. He retired in Sonoma, California. He died a multi-millionaire. This guy was my father-in-law. He died before he could teach me all of his tricks. Great guy. Story 6. My dad, 30-plus years in banking, was VP of credit at a well-known AG finance company arm. Best guess was around $180K base salary towards the end. But he had stock options, pension, 9% 401K match, and his yearly bonus was close to $400K. After he retired, he just worked on his investments. Stock options at $65 per share and sold at $200. Invested in Nvidia at the right time. Lives off pension / 401K with zero debt and has millions invested. If you're wondering if I'm spoiled, after college I asked for help with buying a car. Found an old Acura for $3,500. He made me sign a contract for 24 months at 4% interest. Made me provide pay stubs for my job to verify I could pay him back. Put himself as lien holder on title, the works. Even made me do the amortization schedule. Hard ass, but it's made me much better for it. Story 7. My husband and I were on our honeymoon in Jamaica in 2021. Met a couple around our age at the resort that live in New York. He's an anesthesiologist and she's a surgical tech. One night we got pretty drunk and were talking about his work-related experiences, and I'll never forget how he told us about a pregnant woman that he gave the wrong dose to. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but I think there was a lot of chaos in the room and someone shouted out incorrect info or something. I don't know, not an excuse either way. And she died. He kind of joked about it, but it was clear he used that as a defense mechanism and hadn't really processed his involvement in her death. Still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. Then he did a huge line of coke and I chugged my wine awkwardly. Story 8. First, he was born very upper middle class. Not super rich, but still with a lot of advantages. Then he went to college, did well, and got advanced degrees. Started a business in a very technical field. Lived extremely frugally for a long time while working very hard. Then he started a second more marketable business, from which he was paid decently well. He ran the business through many ups and downs, until he was in his 60 ES. Then he sold the business for about $20 million. Story 9. Pretend they're self-made from sales, despite being given millions of dollars from family to invest and insider trading information about launch dates from other relatives. Well, that's the youngest rich person. The other was an oil exec through the 80s and 90s. Now they just run a small business for fun. IDK, who's richer now. Story 10. My aunt's brother is a multimillionaire who owns Sonic franchises throughout Central Texas. He's also a cheap asshole who washed his hands of his mother with dementia, raised 3 entitled children, and treats his sister like shit for not being as wealthy as him despite her being pretty well off herself. ETA. My aunt married into the family. Her brother is not my uncle. Story 11. There's this family in Indianapolis. I went to the most expensive private school in the state with their kids. When I interned for our U.S. Senator, 2 of their cousins were manning the phones at his office front desks. Minority chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. They have a privately held construction company, so no one knows the numbers. Sort of an American bin Laden family. They do projects for China's Belt and Road Initiative. They designed and built China's highways and high-speed rail. They build ports, train stations, and airports in China, Asia, and Africa. The dad is in the board of a top 10 U.S. university. Rough estimates put them in the $65, $80 billion net worth range, maybe higher. Story 12. Trust fund kid from his family empire. Grandparents started a nationwide company and sold to investors for, who knows, maybe 100 million or more. Money makes money just by existing. Not a single person in their nuclear family has to do anything for the rest of time, including grandkids and great-grandkids. They continue to make money off of investing in real estate. He gets more money in his trust fund than I will ever make in my career, 100K plus earner per year, by simply existing in the right family. Absolutely jealous and maddening to think about. Interesting enough, his life is totally going to shit from addiction issues and getting mixed with the wrong people. Story 13. The richest person I know is a childhood friend who created a sustainable coffee chain. It started with a small shop that served organic and fair trade coffee, and little by little it expanded. Now his company has dozens of stores in several cities, all committed to ecological practices and supporting communities of local producers. His success is based on his vision of combining business with social responsibility, and I am proud to see how he has prospered doing what he loves. Story 14. Nothing. She inherited the money at age 62 from her birth father. He told her that his dying wish was that she quit her job and enjoy the rest of her life. So she did. She dabbles in real estate here and there and invested lots of it. She is my MIL, and I couldn't think of a more deserving person to be gifted that much money from someone they had just met 5 years ago. Story 15. Co-founded a tech company which they later took public, and eventually as majority shareholders were able to sell it to a larger company for a huge sum. He's since started another tech company and has a stake in multiple others. His net worth is probably well into the hundreds of millions, but when we get a chance to hang out, he's essentially the same guy that I met standing in line to get our college IDs on our first day on campus, just with a shitload of money and a very different lifestyle than I have. Story 16. Nothing. Got rich during .com era but cashed out before those bubbles bursts. Now he just travels and spends time in different parts of the world. Don't know the specifics of his money, but it's invested. So he's just living off of those earnings and not doing anything. Even the vacation homes don't go on Airbnb, and he's not a landlord. Just leaves them vacant, or his family uses them when he's not using them. Story 17. My boss is a self-made multimillionaire. His great-great-grandfather started a single coffin-making and undertaking business in the 1800s. He grew it to be the largest funeral and cremation provider in our state. But that wasn't what made him wealthy. In 1983, he started a funeral planning insurance company and grew it to now be sold in 47 states. He sold this company several years ago for an undisclosed amount. He was making bank, but also giving a lot back to the communities we serve. We still provide funerals and cremations to youths and children and babies at no charge to their families, among many other philanthropic endeavors. Story 18. They do life insurance sales. When I was working there with them, they said if managed to sell 4,000 annual premium each week from like mid-October till the end of year, he'd buy me a Tesla. Not only I have gotten a free Tesla, but 4K annual premium a week paid me $1,500. So a Tesla and like 15K, 10 weeks. Would have been great if I didn't suck. Story 20. My father-in-law says he sells money. The best I can understand it, he uses his own assets to secure loans from private lenders to people who cannot get money from banks. He does huge deals and takes 6 to 10% based on the risk to him. It is all about his relationships with people who have a shit ton of liquid assets and want to make a return on it. The borrower gives 10% to the lender and 10% to him, and now they have access to whatever funds they need. He says most the deals he works are real estate deals, but will sometimes do business investments. The last time I was visiting him, he did a $40 million deal with 4 days of phone calls and 1 meeting in person, totaling about 10 hours of work, and made 6% on it all. He tells me that he does around 10 deals a month, but most of them are just a couple million, and his go-to-take is 8%, 6% if he trusts you and knows you, 8% is the go-to, 10% if you are a new customer, and 12% if you are high risk. Story 21. They're not alive anymore, but he used to be head of an oil and gas company in Texas. His wife never worked and grew up wealthy. He was poor before building his wealth. Very down to earth. I think their children are still alive and still have some wealth from the parents. The only reason I know them is because my grandma was their maid. Thankfully, they were nice people. I have fun childhood memories of their house. Softest carpets I've ever felt. Story 22. The richest people I know personally are realtors. Professor from college and recent landlord who was forced to sell building I'm living in. Both great guys, respectful. Professor obviously educated, very good in finance and business, built his wealth. Current landlord who is no longer my landlord, great guy, nicest, kindest LL I've ever met. His mentality is, what I'm gonna do with $1 billion? I don't need my name on a building. I'd rather make less while my tenants are happy. At least I can help them so they can do something with their life. I'd rather help people, just incredible human. He's a former architect who possibly realized how corrupt real estate development is and decided it's easier to just flip properties and become a landlord. He was widowed after 20 years of marriage. He recently married his woman, 60 years old, travels 4x a year, and preparing for life in South Asia with his new wife. I believe he earned every bit of his wealth and happiness. Great landlord in my book. Story 23. Insurance for hospitals. We already grew up in a wealthy area, and his dad started the company, so they grew up really rich. When Dad died, he took over and set up his sister to never have to work and love her life the way she's been accustomed to. He's 45 and could retire now and still have more money than you could know what to do with. The best part is that if you like at him or his wife, you wouldn't be able to tell. Nothing designer, nothing flashy except for his car. He treats himself to a new, super fancy Mercedes every 2 years. She drives that Volvo SUV or whatever it is. The nicest, most gracious people in the world that you forget how much money they have. They even threw my 40th birthday party at their house without me even asking and got me a black cake with a skull sitting on top and had everyone dress like I did when I was a young teenage punk. That's how you do rich. Story 24. Probably my BIL who is a heart surgeon in the Chicago area. I don't know his net worth, but I would guess it to be north of $10 million. Not super wealthy, but he does well. I also know a lottery winner. Won approximately $100 million and took a bit over $30 mil after taxes and the lump sum distribution. We aren't buddies or anything, but he was a customer of mine and he would know who I am if you mentioned my name. Story 25. Guy worked in asset management / finance / investing. He made a lot of money doing it and retired early. Then he sold pretty much everything he had, either sold or rented out his house, bought an RV, and lived for about 2 decades traveling the continent from Alaska to Mexico and everywhere in between the oceans, just camping and seeing stuff. I've seen pics of him in the Alaskan wilderness, then a month later he's at Burning Man in the desert, then a month or 2 later he's at the Grand Canyon, then Niagara Falls, etc. He says it's what he always wanted to do. Us friends joke that he's trying to hide out from some of his disgruntled clients. Story 26. I know a guy, my dad's BFF, who built up a multi-state service business. After his wife left him, he then left it to his son because he didn't even need to sell it. After that, he was late 40s/50 and bored. He owned a plane and would fly all over North and South America. He then started moving. He has moved to multiple countries and worked many odd jobs. He remarried twice and sold his plane. Currently, he is single, 67, and lives in a town of 2,000 people driving a shuttle van. Everywhere he lives minimally. Tiny apartment, simple belongings, and he always gets some minimum wage job that allows for a lot of freedom in his schedule. This is a contrast to his prior lifestyle. He has lived in his current location for 5 years, but he takes at least 3 months off per year and just travels, and he will include my dad for as long as he can go. He just spent a month in Europe, and my dad joined him for 2 weeks. He has recently been talking about moving back to the US. He even bought a house near my parents, LOL. The full story is my parents were moving to a new state and bought land to build. The friend bought a house near there. Later, my parents changed their mind and bought a standing house 30 miles further north, since building in that location would be a pain for various reasons. So the friend bought a second house in the new location and had it renovated, but it has been sitting for 2 years. In my opinion, he has some remorse because the house is too big, and he prefers smaller houses so he doesn't feel tied down. Story 27. My husband. He is a nuclear reactor operator for Duke Energy. He owns rental property at the beach and the mountains. He bought Nvidia stock just before it took off and has invested wisely. He told me when we were teenagers that we would be millionaires before age 35, and he was right. He is the kindest man, and you would never know he is well off. He makes sure his family is taken care of, and we want for nothing. Story 28 owns a major sports franchise. It's my father-in-law's friend. He does his personal taxes for the owner. He's at almost all our family gatherings and a super nice guy. I've probably chatted with him 50 times or so. He's selfless too. Even though he's super rich, he donates a ton to charity. We go a few times a year and sit in the owner's box with him at games too. My family isn't even super rich, just normal middle-class people, but he enjoys our company. I won't name who it is because it's not my place to say in case he doesn't want this said, but he's awesome. It's great knowing that people who own multi-billion-dollar businesses still bring homemade potato salad to children's birthday parties in the suburbs for a middle-class family. My in-laws are also friends with a very well-known actor. He doesn't really act much anymore, though, but his earnings are significantly lower than the sports owner. Story 29. I work in investing, and I know multiple people worth more than $50 million. They all do more than one thing. They are diversified across many asset classes and investment styles. I was talking with a client yesterday who is believed to be worth over $200 million. He invests in private equity, debt, preferred equity, and equity, owns a hard money lender, invests in retail strip centers, and is the primary debt financier behind a fairly large multifamily developer. That's just what he mentioned in 30 minutes. He did say he doesn't have any stock investments. He also mentioned he doesn't invest in anything yielding less than 7% per year because 7% means you're doubling your money in a decade. He started out as a database architect at Oracle. Story 30. Richest person I know personally is retired in his 80s. As a younger man, he was an original investor in a regional railroad road that primarily served a few industrial sites. The original company was bought out by a bigger regional RR company that had a larger network of rail and wanted to connect to their industrial rail. He took his payment as stock in the bigger company and was hired on as an executive and financial guy. That company sold to Union Pacific, and in that acquisition, he became a multimillionaire. This was in the late 60s. I don't know exact dates. He became a venture capitalist, founded a local town bank, and invested well for the remainder of his career before a national bank chain bought his local branch he owned. That is when he retired. I don't know exactly how much money he has, but he has owned and sold 2 railroad companies and a bank. His wealth is the fuck you variety. Story 31. If we ignore the chairman of the company I work for, who literally just visits a couple of the offices to say hello once or twice a month, and has a meeting now and again to find out how much more money people have made for him, then it's probably either a friend that gets paid a shit ton of money in cybersecurity, or a friend that contracts in project management, but has been at the same company for about 10 years on a crazy day rate, taking most of his income as dividends. Don't have any friends that could stop working and carry on with the same lifestyle for the rest of their days, nor friends that could go out and buy the newest Ferrari whenever one comes out.